Let's start it with our first news. Jon Jones vs Tom Aspinall seemingly out of the equation for next summer's historic UFC White House event. Speculation is running wild about who could serve as the headliner. On Thursday, UFC featherweight champion Ilia Topuria made his intentions clear through social media, strongly hinting that he expects to be front and center. Topuria wrote, "Who wants to bet with me that I'm the main event at the White House?" This bold statement immediately sparked discussions across the MMA community, as fans and analysts began considering the realistic possibilities for Topuria's involvement. Currently, the UFC does not have any American-born champions. This fact increases the likelihood that Dana White and the promotion may turn to an international star like Topuria to carry the banner for this historic showcase. When considering potential blockbuster opponents, one name that keeps coming up is none other than Islam Makhachev. Makhachev, who has already cemented himself as a dominant lightweight champion, has flirted with the idea of moving up in weight. If he were to capture welterweight gold while Topuria remains on top at lightweight, the stage could be perfectly set for an unforgettable champion versus champion super fight. Such a matchup would be monumental for the UFC and a fitting main event for an occasion as historic as a fight card at the White House. Former UFC light heavyweight champion Rashad Evans recently weighed in on the situation. While Dana White has insisted that Jon Jones will not be on the card, Evans still believes there's a chance we could see the legendary heavyweight make his way onto the lineup. According to Evans, timing and strategy will play a huge role in how negotiations unfold. Evans explained, "You've got to make him beg a little bit. You've got to make him plead his case so you know he's fully buying in. That way, there won't be any antics, and you'll know he's showing up to train, showing up to prepare, and giving everything he has for that fight." This perspective highlights an important aspect of UFC matchmaking: control and leverage. Dana White has a history of making fighters prove their commitment before granting them high-profile opportunities, especially when legacy and history are on the line. While White has stated the promotion won't begin seriously building the White House card until February, the pieces are slowly starting to fall into place. Ilia Topuria's rise as a global superstar makes him an obvious candidate. His recent performances, combined with his growing popularity among fans worldwide, put him in prime position to carry the promotion's banner at such a historic venue. If paired with a rival of Makhachev's caliber, the UFC could deliver one of the biggest fights in its history. In the end, the UFC White House card still has plenty of time to take shape. Whether it's Topuria, Makhachev, or even Jon Jones making a surprise appearance, one thing is clear: this event has the potential to be one of the most memorable spectacles in combat sports history. Before moving on to the next news, we have a quick request for you. We're always working to improve our content and truly value your support. If you could take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon, it would mean a lot to us. That way, you'll never miss an update. Move on to another news. For months, fans speculated that Israel Adesanya would seek revenge against Sean Strickland after losing his middleweight title in one of the biggest upsets in recent UFC history. Adesanya, known for his competitive spirit and eagerness to run it back against opponents who've beaten him, initially hinted at wanting that rematch. However, in a recent interview with Submission Radio, the last stylebender put those rumors to rest. Adesanya revealed that he is no longer interested in waiting around for a second fight with Strickland. Instead, his focus is on moving forward with his career and simply getting back into the octagon. When asked about the rematch, Adesanya explained his mindset with refreshing honesty. "If you want to get something done right, do it right the first time. That's the lesson I learned," Adesanya said. He acknowledged that Strickland is now focused on other things in his personal and professional life, and while that may work for him, it isn't something Adesanya is willing to let slow down his own momentum. Strickland, who secured a massive payday by defeating Adesanya and briefly holding the middleweight title, has been enjoying the spotlight and capitalizing on new opportunities outside the cage. Adesanya, however, made it clear that he has no interest in sitting on the sidelines waiting for Strickland to circle back. He's doing other things in his own life. He's made the money he wanted to make. "I don't want to be waiting around. I've moved on. I just want to fight." This statement reflects a key part of Adesanya's legacy: his willingness to stay active and compete regularly, regardless of the opponent. Throughout his career, he has taken on anyone the UFC has placed in front of him, often fighting multiple times a year to cement his status as one of the most active champions in modern history. Now, with the Strickland chapter behind him, the question becomes, who should Adesanya fight next? The middleweight division is brimming with exciting contenders, from Dricus du Plessis, who currently holds the title, to rising stars like Khamzat Chimaev and established threats such as Jared Cannonier. Each potential matchup brings its own storyline and would undoubtedly generate massive fan interest. Adesanya's decision to move past Strickland also highlights his maturity and evolving outlook on the fight game. Rather than dwelling on setbacks or chasing one opponent, he's choosing to embrace the bigger picture, focusing on his career longevity, his passion for competition, and his pursuit of greatness. For fans, this means we can expect to see Adesanya back in action sooner rather than later. While the opponent and date are yet to be confirmed, one thing is clear: Adesanya is ready to return, and the middleweight division should take notice. As the UFC continues to build its calendar for 2025, Adesanya's name remains one of the biggest draws in combat sports. Whether it's a title fight or a high-stakes contender matchup, his return promises to be a must-watch event. Move on to another news. The tension between UFC bantamweight champion Merab Dvalishvili and rising contender Umar Nurmagomedov continues to grow, and it doesn't look like it's going to calm down anytime soon. During a recent sit-down with Daniel Cormier, Merab opened up about the origins of his issues with Umar and explained why he feels the young Dagestani contender has been disrespectful toward him and other veterans in the division. Merab recalled how things shifted once the UFC began giving Umar more recognition and higher-level opponents. He was fighting not ranked guys, Merab explained, and then after they give him a very high-ranked guy like Corey Sandhagen, he started to change. He was talking, and then he became disrespectful to me and some other fighters. According to Merab, Umar directly insulted him and other former champions during an encounter at the UFC Performance Institute. Merab even claims to have video evidence of the incident. For example, "I have a video I recorded at the UFC PI," Merab continued. "He told me to my face, 'You are old. Dominic Cruz is old. Cody Garbrandt is old. He was telling us we were all too old,' right to my face. I can send you the video. You can post it with this interview if you want." While the beef with Umar continues to build, Merab has stayed busy sharpening his skills. Recently, he trained with legendary former flyweight champion Demetrius "Mighty Mouse" Johnson. The two had an intense training session where Merab managed to catch Johnson in a neck-crank scarf hold submission so tight that Johnson admitted it felt like his ribs might break. Despite the intensity, the sparring session also had its lighter moments. At one point, Johnson joked about his age and durability, saying, "I'm 39, I can't be taking concussions." The playful exchange showed mutual respect between two elite fighters, even in the heat of tough training. With Merab's highly anticipated fight against Corey Sandhagen approaching, the bantamweight division is buzzing with excitement. Between Merab's championship reign, Umar's rise as an undefeated prospect, and the presence of other top contenders like Sean O'Malley, Petr Yan, and Aljamain Sterling, the division is arguably one of the deepest and most competitive in the UFC today. Merab's call-out of Umar highlights the generational clash between established champions and rising prospects. While Umar has the skills and potential to be a future title holder, Merab made it clear that respect must be earned inside the octagon, not by dismissing the accomplishments of those who paved the way. As the bantamweight picture continues to unfold, all eyes will be on whether Merab and Umar eventually meet inside the cage. With personal animosity fueling the rivalry, a showdown between the two could quickly become one of the most intriguing fights in the division's recent history. For now, Merab remains focused on Sandhagen, but his message to Umar Nurmagomedov was loud and clear: disrespect will not be tolerated, and if they meet in the cage, Merab is more than ready to teach him a lesson. Move on to another news. The UFC has once again been struck by last-minute changes, and this time it happened at UFC Perth. Just hours before fight week preparations were set to intensify, news broke that another fight had been pulled from the card. Fans and analysts were left disappointed when it was revealed that rising welterweight contender Oban Elliott was forced to withdraw from his scheduled bout against Jonathan Malev. The UFC confirmed the unfortunate development in an official statement. Due to illness, Oban Elliott has been removed from his welterweight bout with Jonathan Malev. There will be no replacement opponent for this matchup, and the fight will likely be rescheduled for a future date. While the promotion did not provide specific details about Elliott's illness, the update came as a major blow for both the fighter and fans anticipating the matchup. Elliott, known for his relentless pace and grit inside the octagon, has been building momentum in the welterweight division. Many were eager to see how he would stack up against Malev, who has been steadily making a name for himself with his balanced skill set and sharp fight IQ. The cancellation becomes even more disappointing when placed into context. Just last week, UFC Perth suffered another setback when its co-main event was scrapped, leaving fans frustrated with what is beginning to to feel like a cursed fight card. With multiple adjustments and unexpected removals, the event is now struggling to maintain its original star power and competitive intrigue. For Elliott, this pause represents a frustrating roadblock. Fighters often go through grueling training camps, pushing their bodies to the absolute limit in preparation for fight night. To then be forced out due to unforeseen health issues can be mentally and emotionally draining. On the other hand, Jonathan Malev is left without an opponent after weeks of hard preparation, cutting weight, and structuring his training camp specifically for Elliott's style. These last-minute cancellations often leave fighters without compensation, and in some cases, momentum in their careers can stall. The timing of this cancellation has sparked renewed debate within the MMA community about the reliability of fight cards. Media outlets and analysts have been vocal in questioning whether UFC Perth might turn out to be a flop, given the series of last-minute changes. Fans who purchased tickets with hopes of seeing stacked matchups are understandably frustrated, especially considering how international fight weeks often carry high anticipation and hefty expenses for traveling supporters. Still, there remains optimism that the UFC will look to reschedule Elliott versus Malev at a later date, perhaps on another major card in the coming months. Both fighters are talented prospects in the welterweight division, and their clash still carries plenty of intrigue. For now, UFC Perth will have to move forward with a slightly weakened lineup, hoping the remaining bouts deliver the kind of action fans crave. As always in the fight game, uncertainty is the only constant, and once again, it has reshaped the narrative heading into fight week. Move on to another news. Former UFC light heavyweight champion Quinton "Rampage" Jackson has made a bold claim about how he would fare in today's UFC. Known for his ferocious knockout power, larger-than-life personality, and legendary battles inside the octagon, Rampage believes that if he were in his prime today, he would be completely unstoppable in the UFC's light heavyweight division. By the time Rampage Jackson made his official UFC debut, he was already a veteran of the sport with over 30 professional fights under his belt. Despite the wear and tear on his body from years of competing in Pride and other organizations, he wasted no time making an impact. In just his second UFC fight, Rampage shocked the MMA world by knocking out Chuck the Iceman Liddell to capture the UFC light heavyweight championship. His explosive striking, raw strength, and aggressive style made him one of the most feared fighters of his era. During a recent appearance on the HJR podcast, Rampage was asked how he thinks he would perform if a younger, prime version of himself competed in today's UFC landscape. Without hesitation, Rampage expressed full confidence in his dominance. "If you dropped a prime Rampage Jackson in today's UFC, I'd be unstoppable. I would sell everything I own right now just to buy a time machine and bring back that version of me." Prime Rampage would run through the entire light heavyweight division. "Nobody would be able to stop me, standing or otherwise. I'd bulldoze right through that weight class." This bold statement has reignited debate among fans and analysts about how fighters from previous generations would perform against modern competition. The UFC's light heavyweight division today is filled with dynamic athletes like Jamahal Hill, Yuri Prochazka, Magomed Ankalaev, and Alexander Rakic, all of whom bring new striking techniques, elite grappling, and advanced fight IQ. However, Rampage's supporters argue that his raw knockout power, granite chin, and relentless forward pressure would still make him a nightmare matchup for many of today's top contenders. Rampage has always been known for his confidence and charisma, both inside and outside the cage. While some may see his comments as self-promotion, others view them as a reminder of just how dominant he was in his prime. His slam knockouts, highlight reel finishes, and fan-favorite brawling style remain etched in MMA history. Outside of MMA, Rampage has also dabbled in boxing. Earlier this year, he was scheduled to face fellow former UFC champion Rashad Evans in a boxing match, but the fight was ultimately cancelled after promoters failed to deliver on their promises. Still, Rampage remains a vocal presence in combat sports and continues to share his thoughts on the evolution of MMA. Whether or not a prime Rampage Jackson would dominate today's UFC is a debate that will never be settled, but one thing is certain: his impact on the sport is undeniable. Rampage helped define an era of MMA, and his confidence that he could succeed in any generation is a testament to the legacy he left behind. Move on to another news. Joe Rogan is widely recognized as one of the most iconic voices in mixed martial arts. As the longtime commentator for the UFC, Rogan has called countless fights, witnessing some of the most brutal knockouts, historic victories, and devastating defeats in MMA history. While his job requires him to remain professional and unbiased during live broadcasts, Rogan recently opened up on his podcast about the emotional toll it takes takes when he watches fighters he personally knows and cares for suffer painful losses inside the octagon. In a heartfelt discussion, Rogan admitted that it's particularly difficult when those fighters are not just athletes he covers but also friends he has grown close to over the years. He reflected on some of the moments that hit him hardest, recalling specifically the careers of Daniel Cormier and Brendan Schaub. With Daniel Cormier, Rogan pointed to two defining losses that were extremely difficult for him to watch: Cormier's knockout defeat to Jon Jones in their rematch, and later his co-loss to Stipe Miocic. Rogan explained that seeing Cormier, someone he deeply respected as both a fighter and a person, get finished in such dramatic fashion was heartbreaking. He compared the emotional weight of watching a close friend lose to the feeling of losing a family member or even a beloved pet, describing it as a deeply personal and painful experience that lingers long after the fight ends. Rogan then turned to Brendan Schaub, who he described as one of the toughest situations he's ever dealt with as a friend and commentator. Rogan infamously confronted Schaub during a 2014 episode of his podcast, urging him to walk away from fighting due to the damage he had taken from repeated concussions and knockout losses. Rogan admitted that it was one of the hardest conversations he's ever had because Schaub was reluctant to quit at the time. The thing about Brendan that most people don't realize is how many concussions he took. He would get knocked out a lot, and I told him, "You've got to get out now. If you don't get out now, there's no happy ending. There's no happy ending for the guy who keeps getting knocked out. It's terrible." That moment became one of the most talked about segments in podcast history, and Rogan reflected that it still brings up strong emotions for him to this day. Watching fighters he knows personally suffer career-altering defeats is not something he can easily shake off, even as a professional commentator. Rogan admitted that he sometimes feels overwhelmed with sadness, even to the point of tears, when recalling those painful memories. He emphasized that while fans may see fighters simply as athletes competing in a sport, he sees them as human beings who sacrifice their health, well-being, and futures in pursuit of greatness. The reality of those sacrifices weighs heavily on him. Looking ahead, Rogan will continue to be a central figure in the commentary booth for the UFC's upcoming slate of events, including UFC 320, UFC 322, and UFC 323, all set to take place in the United States. While he'll maintain his professionalism on fight night, Rogan's candid admission shows that behind the microphone is a man who deeply cares about the fighters and feels their highs and lows in a way only someone so connected to the sport could understand.